Hey, it's CharlieJeane here. Today we're going to talk about why you shouldn't follow a gluten-free diet for IBS. But before I get into that, I think it's important to talk about gluten. Because what is it? Do you know? Perhaps you're like many people that have heard of it, but not too sure what it is. Well, gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley and rye, so foods containing these grains can contain gluten, unless of course they've specifically been removed, like in gluten-free bread and pasta. But why do people avoid gluten? There's loads of reasons why, but an important one is for people who have celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition where the body attacks itself when you have gluten. And it attacks the small intestine, and if it's undiagnosed or untreated and the person continues to eat gluten, then they can end up with gut symptoms just like IBS. Plus, you can have complications such as unintentional weight loss, nutritional deficiencies that can affect health, such as anemia or osteoporosis, which is where you have weak and fragile bones that are at risk of breaking. And in rare cases, gluten ataxia. So this is where gluten causes damage to the brain, and then this affects your mobility, movement, speech, and sometimes vision. And also, if celiac disease is untreated or undiagnosed, there's an increased risk of small bowel cancer. So all of this is critical to rule out celiac disease, amongst other things, before IBS can be diagnosed. So it's super important to have an official diagnosis, not self-diagnose because you think, I've got wind, diarrhea, constipation, bloating, all these kinds of symptoms, and just assume that it's IBS because it could be celiac disease. So get an official diagnosis from your physician, and then you can take the right and necessary action to manage or treat the condition that you have, whether it's IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, whatever it is, so you can take the right action to make sure that you're treating and managing it, and like I just mentioned, avoiding all those horrible consequences. Other reasons why people who don't have gluten-related diseases such as celiac disease and they avoid gluten includes social and traditional media, peer pressure, celebrities, influencers, aggressive marketing by manufacturers and retail outlets. And then there's all the claims about gluten-free diets and them saying about, the immediate health benefits, that it prevents certain diseases from developing, improves your exercise performance, it prevents exercise-related gut issues. And then you've got all these quack doctors and charlatans that basically claim that a gluten-free diet is, will cure everything really. Not that I'm saying any of that is true, by the way. And then following a gluten-free diet is so much easier now than it used to be, even like 5 years ago, because of all the products that are available in shops and supermarkets. There's an increased awareness of gluten and gluten-free products. And the gluten-free food market value for 2022 is nearly $7 billion and is expected to double by 2032. So with all of this, it's easy to see why you could think that you should follow a gluten-free diet. But here's 5 reasons why you shouldn't follow a gluten-free diet to manage your IBS. You risk becoming deficient in certain vitamins, minerals and fibre, which have consequences for your health if you don't follow a well thought out and nutritionally adequate gluten-free diet. And following a low fibre diet over the long term increases risk of chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke and bowel cancer. And because fibre can help us to feel fuller for longer, long-term low fibre diets can affect our body weight too, which could lead to being overweight or obese, which then puts us at an increased risk of conditions such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke and cancer. So it's like double bubble risk. Hurts your gut health. Low fibre diets negatively affect your gut bacteria and your gut health, which can then make gut symptoms worse. But on top of this, because of the numerous roles that gut bacteria have in our bodies, it can affect other aspects as well, like the production and absorption of certain nutrients, your immune system, your mood, your sleep, your body weight, numerous things. There's a lot of gluten-free products out there that are processed, and they can have more fat, sugar and salt than their gluten-containing counterparts. So it's always worth checking food labels if you are deciding to follow, or if you are following a gluten-free diet for whatever, your reasoning is behind that. You pay more for gluten-free products than their gluten-containing counterparts. And here's another crucial point. Scientific research has not proven a gluten-free diet benefits people with IBS, and clinical guidelines around the world either specifically state that a gluten-free diet isn't recommended, or they say, that there isn't any robust quality evidence to support a gluten-free diet with IBS, or there's no mention of it, which then this suggests that there's a lack of evidence, as otherwise, they would have mentioned it, wouldn't they? They would have put it in their guidelines and either recommended not to have a gluten-free diet or to recommend a gluten-free diet with IBS if that was the case, which is not. So if you're following a gluten-free diet and you're using gluten-free products, you can still suffer with symptoms. And this is the case with so many people who have come to me for help, because it wasn't the gluten, it was the other components in that food that was the trigger. There can be other ingredients and compounds in gluten-free foods and gluten-containing foods which could be a trigger for you. So you need to find out the true culprit to your symptoms and not just assume that it's gluten. And there's another important point to mention here as well. And gluten-free bread can be low in fibre, so again you need to check the food labels. And also many manufacturers add fibre back into the dough to increase the fibre content, and then depending on what they use, that could also be a symptom trigger for you. So that gluten-free bread that typically costs you about £1 per 100 gram, instead of the bread that does contain gluten, which typically costs about 20p per 100 gram, might even be making your symptoms worse, not better. And that's not even considering what else that you might be eating that could also be triggering your symptoms. And in terms of the exercise-related gut issues, again, gluten-free diets hasn't been shown to benefit performance or symptoms. And in fact, symptoms can be prevented or reduced by altering your dietary intake of other nutrients and compounds, and also tackling other factors such as meal and snack timings and your stress. So unless you've got celiac disease, going gluten-free isn't helpful, and it can have a range of nasty and unnecessary consequences. So I'd always recommend getting the help of a dietitian. And by the way, if you don't yet have a diagnosis for your gut symptoms, go see your physician as soon as you can. Don't delay, because you don't know what it is. It could be a range of different diseases, or it could be something quite simple all the way through to something really serious. It could be bowel cancer. So it's always wise to get your symptoms checked out if you haven't got a diagnosis, or if you have got a diagnosis and you see a significant change in the types of symptoms that you're experiencing, or if you've got blood in your stools, in your poo, if your poo's bright red, you've got bright red bits in it and you haven't eaten anything red, if you've got like black, dark brown, tarry stools, if they're really pale, yellow, white colour, or if they're green, if they float, if they're super, super smelly, then definitely go and speak with your physician. And leading up to having a diagnosis, you need to make sure that you're having gluten in at least one meal a day for at least 6 weeks before they test you for celiac disease, because they're testing you for specific antibodies in your blood that your body produces when you've eaten gluten. They may also do a biopsy, which is where they take a sample of tissue from inside your small intestine by it's a thin flexible tube down your mouth and all the way through to your small intestine. And they're basically looking to see if your body has had a reaction to gluten, like I spoke about earlier. And if you've been avoiding gluten, and you've had these tests done for celiac disease, and your physician forgets to check with you if you've been eating or avoiding gluten, which can happen, because I've had previous clients where this has been the case, your tests will come back negative because you've been avoiding gluten, so your body hasn't reacted, so it looks like you don't have celiac disease when actually you might have it. So you need to get retested, which is then a faff because you've got to book appointments. It's not very nice for you having, your blood taken, and also if you need to have that biopsy. It wastes your time, it wastes your physician's time, and these tests cost money, whether or not it's through the NHS if you're in the UK, or if you have an insurance company pay for it, or you have to pay for it yourself, depending on where you live in the world. So it's best to get it right first time. And if you really don't want to bring gluten back into your diet before getting tested, then you definitely need to speak with your physician about this. So that's it from me today. I hope you found this helpful and interesting. So best wishes to you all. Take care. Bye for now.